Hey, what's up and welcome back to another layer by layer tutorial. In today's tutorial, I want to talk more about adaptive designs. So in last week's project, it was a 3D printed enclosure for the Adafruit Feather, and the goal for this project was to make it so that folks can make quick adjustments via user parameters so that they can adapt the design for their specific use for the specific project. So what I needed to kind of learn is how to make certain features grow and adapt whenever these parameters change. So here's a quick example. So I have a couple of user parameters set here for the case. And if you want to learn more about user parameters, you can take a look at some of my other tutorials, which I'll have linked over here. And I'll have the link down below as well. And there's some really great ones from the Autodesk YouTube channel, which I'll also have linked. But real quick, we can change something like this, like the length of the case. So when we update this one thing, a whole bunch of other versions will update as well. And you'll notice that these mounting tabs have sort of adapted and moved in the center of the case. So these little mounting tabs will always be in the center no matter how you adjust the length, whether you increase it or make it shorter. These features will always stay there. And that's not just the only feature. We also have these kind of little nubs that connect this bottom battery holder compartment to the bottom of the case. And then we also have these sort of nubs and indentations on the cover of the case that you can kind of see in this area here that are also driven with user parameters, and they are adaptive in the sense that whenever we update the length of the enclosure, these things will always be in the center of these of the cases. So I'll change this back now from 100 millimeters to, I think it was 68. So when I update this, Fusion will calculate all the features and design history and then just update it. So everything stays where it's sort of expected to. So this is a really powerful way to kind of make features that are adaptive whenever you want to make changes, kind of drastic changes. You can make these kind of adaptive features. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to kind of implement this into a really, really simple design from scratch, right? So the goal here is I'm going to make kind of like a little enclosure type thing. So I'm going to make a new sketch and then use the 2-point rectangle to just kind of sketch out something. And I'm not going to give any dimensions yet. I'm just kind of make a simple 2-point rectangle. So I'm going to extrude this out to, I don't know, like 12 millimeters. That's a little short, but we'll make it bigger. So now what we'll do is we'll make some user parameters, right? So user parameters is under the modify window. I like to have it in my toolbar here, my sort of main toolbar for my modeling workspace. And to add that, you just kind of, whenever you roll over one of these things, there's this little arrow thing, and that just kind of brings it up there. So that's what I have. So I'm going to click on that, open it up. And another thing is if you don't see that there, then you're probably not capturing your design history, which is this little guy here at the bottom. So if you want to do that, right click on your main assembly and say capture design history. Right now it says do not capture design history, but that's because I'm already capturing it. So moving on, I'm going to open that back up and I'm going to make a new user parameter. So let's click on the plus button. Let's start with length. So I'm just going to make length, and for the expression, that's really the value of a given measurement. So in this case we have millimeters, but you can change this to whatever you like. So I'm going to make this 60 and hit enter. Let's make another one. Hit the green button again, the little plus button, and I will say width. Let's make this 30 or 40. Doesn't matter because we're going to change it later. And we'll make another one, and this one will be called height. So let's change this to maybe 20. Hit OK. All right, so now that I have those set up, I can start using them in our dimensions, right? So I'm going to step into our sketch that we just made, and I'm going to start assigning some dimensions. So to do that, I'm going to use the Sketch Dimension tool, which is under the Sketch menu, or you can use your hotkey on your keyboard, D, and that'll bring up the tool. Switch right to it. So I can click on this edge, and it's set to 75, which I really didn't know what it was. So I'm going to type length, and I don't have to type in the whole thing. I can just type in a couple of letters, and Fusion will kind of filter this out and say, do you want length? And I'll say, yeah. You can click on it and then hit enter, or you can just hit enter twice and then it'll get applied. So I'll do the same thing, but now for the width here. So I can click that out and then say width, there we go, WI, enter, hit enter again. And that's it for that one. So I'll hit OK. So now I have those set up. And then for the height, I'm actually going to double click on the extrusion that we did. And then instead of 12, I'm going to select all on that little floaty window thing. And I'm going to say height. There we go. Hit enter. So now this whole box, the width and the length and the height of the box are now all driven with user parameters, right? So if I open my thing up, I can change a couple things here. Maybe I want this to be 30, hit enter, and you can see right away it gets updated. Maybe this needs to be 15, maybe this needs to be 12, and then we could just keep playing around with these numbers until we find something that we like. The next thing I'll do is just kind of give it that enclosure type feel. I'm going to add some fillets because I love me some fillets. So I'll click on these. I'll say 3. We could also make those driven with user parameters, but we really don't need to right now. I'll click on the top surface, bring up my modeling toolbox with the hotkey S, and then I'll type in shell. There it is. I'll hit enter, and then I'll add a shell of 1.5 of thickness and hit OK. So now we have kind of a enclosure looking thing. And again, it's kind of important to kind of test your user parameters and make sure nothing breaks as you're kind of adding and stacking features on top of each other. You kind of want to keep checking to make sure that whenever you make a change that none of your features kind of break, right? So I'm going to go ahead and update this. I'm going to make this 60, and I'll maybe make this 40, and I'll leave the height. Okay, so now it looks more like a bigger case. Maybe we want to put a Raspberry Pi in here, or an Arduino, or an Adafruit Feather. So the next thing I'm going to do is, this is really up to you. However this fits your project, I'm going to make a feature on the outside of the case. And this feature, the goal here is to make it so that it updates along with the user parameters. So in this case, I'm going to make sort of a little protrusion that kind of sticks out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these surfaces on the outside. Doesn't matter which one, and it's up to you which one. This is just an example. So I'm going to click on this one. It's blue. So with it selected blue, I'm going to click on the Create Sketch button. And when I do that, Fusion basically makes a projection of that surface, and it makes it in a way where if you ever update it, this projected sketch will get updated because it's always referencing that surface that is tied to this this solid here. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of create that feature right within this this projected sketch. So I'm just going to make another basic 2-point rectangle, and it doesn't matter where it is yet. I'm going to assign constraints and tell it where to go in just a second. So I'm going to click maybe over here, and then why not over here? So there is our rectangle. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude it, so I can hit E on my keyboard, and then click on that, and I'll extrude it to, let's say, 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters. Hit enter. Then I will add some chamfers to some of these edges here. So I'll hit S again to bring up the model toolbox and type in cham. I don't have to spell out the whole thing. I just hit cham, hit enter, and then I'll click on this edge and put 1, like that. And what I want to do is actually I'm going to change the extrusion to 1 millimeter instead of 2, just to kind of go with that. And now we have this kind of extruded piece here, right? And it doesn't matter what it does. It serves a purpose depending on your project, but right now it's just kind of like an example. So let's take a look at what happens when I update some of these user parameters, right? So if I come in here and I change this to 30, you'll see that it kind of breaks, right? Now it's just kind of standing there. There's really no rules defined telling it where to go. It's just kind of there, right? And if I update this to 20 and maybe this one to 20, the height, you'll see that it's just not moving, right? So the goal here is to kind of make this feature always stay in the center and somewhere else, right? So that's what we want to do. So what we'll do is I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to go inside of that sketch that we projected to create this feature here. I'm going to go back in there, and you'll see that the projected sketch has indeed updated, which is really great. And what I'm going to do is I can move this guy around, right? Which is nice. I just double clicked on one of the edges and it created a loop here, a loop selection, so I can move it around. I'm just going to move it around so that I kind of get an idea of where I want it to go. Now the goal is, of course, to make this feature in the center, always to be in the center. And to do that, we can use some construction lines and some constraints. So to make the construction line, I'm going to use the line tool, and I need to find the center of a given edge, right? So if you roll over a edge inside of Fusion when you're in the edit sketch mode, you'll see that as you go down and kind of your cursor gets locked to this thing, you can see my cursor is kind of moving a little bit. If I go down here in the center, where I think is the center, Fusion will let me know that it is the true center, and it's kind of locked there. And it gives you this sort of icon of a triangle. That triangle lets you know that you are indeed in the center of a given edge whichever edge your cursor is currently on. So I want it to be up here. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to move my cursor back down all the way to the next bottom edge, and I'm going to move it until it shows me that lovely little triangle, and that lets me know that is indeed in the center. So I'm going to click, and now I have a line. And the thing with this line is that it's sort of intersecting and it's breaking up. It's kind of cutting these sketches here. So to make it a construction line, I'm going to select that edge that we just created, this line, and then over here in the sketch palette, there's a button that says normal/construction, and you can click on this button, and when you click on it, that edge now turns into a dotted line. And that dotted line is letting us know, as a visual reference, that this is a construction line. It's used for constructing things. So that's cool. So now that I have that set, whenever our case gets updated, this will always be in the center. So now what we want to do is we want to kind of do the same thing to this little smaller rectangle, right? We want to do the same thing here because we need to kind of say that there is we're going to define a constraint saying that the center of this feature will always be in the center with that feature, right? So we'll do kind of the same thing. We'll bring up the line tool, and then we'll say we want the center to be here, and then the center to be right there, right? And then we'll do, of course, the same thing where we select this, and then we make it a construction line. Okay, so now we have these two construction lines, and here's a quick note that if you actually click and drag that construction line, sort of the whole assembly of the little feature gets updated, right? Little sketch. So now what we want to do is we want to say that we want to define a rule saying that we want this to always be lined up with this, right? To do that, it's called a collinear. So we can say over here in the sketch palette, there's a number of constraints. These are kind of like rules that you can assign to a number of different sketch features. So I'm going to click on the collinear, and then I'm going to select this guy over here, and then basically say I want that to always be in the center of this guy here. And right away, the feature gets pushed over there, and you get these kind of new icons. And the icon is actually, if you ever want to delete this rule, you can just select on that icon and hit the delete button, but we kind of want it here. So now if I move these guys, you can see that they are kind of moving. But the thing, I can't move it I can't kind of move this whole thing here outside of it. It's always kind of sliding and locked in that place because we have a constraint. It's a rule set to it. So you can never kind of disobey that rule, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign some sketch dimensions to this thing just to kind of flesh it out. So I'm going to click on this edge here. It's got some weird numbers, so I'm just going to make 2. And then this right here, this width, instead of putting an actual value here, I'm actually going to use a little bit of math. So I'm going to say I want the length to be divided by 2, right? So length divided by 2. So now it's giving me a value of 15. And what's cool about this is now that I'm using the actual length user parameter, it'll always kind of update whenever I update the length, which is kind of cool. Another thing I want to do is I want to say the top of this edge should always be on the top of this edge, right? So to do that, we can use that same constraint called collinear. So I'll click on that and I'll say I want this top edge to go with this top edge. So now it is locked and set in place. So now if I try to move any of these features, I kind of can't, right? It won't let me because it's kind of fully defined. I can't kind of move things around, which is pretty cool. So now that's kind of what I want, right? So I'll hit stop sketch, and everything gets updated. The chamfers are still there, the extrusion is still there, and it's kind of nice. So now watch what happens when I change some of the user parameters. So I'm going to change the height to 12, and instantly you can see that our feature now adapts with the height and is always in place. Well, what about the length? Let's see what happens when we increase the length here. When I put 60, it was for 30, and I put it to 60, you can see that the overall length of the nub has changed, and it is still in the center. That's awesome because now we don't have to worry about having to kind of update this little feature every time we make a quick adjustment. So it's always in the center at the top because we defined it and told it to, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to bring this back down to 30, and you can see that change is still being applied. So that's really cool. Now, let's say we want to have this same feature be on this side here. So instead of actually, and we want it to be the same, right? We want it to be the exact same thing. So we can use a mirror feature where we mirror those faces onto the other side. So that way when we update the length, those two features kind of update with it. So let's do that. To do that, I'm going to use a construction plane. So there's a set of tools called construction planes, which allows you to kind of create work surfaces so that you can work on different types of areas of your design. So in this case, I'm going to use the mid plane, and this allows me to find out the mid plane, the mid area of two different surfaces, right? So I'm going to click on that mid plane. I'm going to say I want this this surface and that surface, and when I do that, we get our mid plane. So this mid plane is the exact center of these two surfaces here. And if you look in your browser over here, there is a new folder called construction, and there is a new plane called plane 1. And we can name it if we wanted to, but I don't think we need to for this case. So we can turn it on and turn it off if we ever want to, but we're going to use it to build our mirror. So the next thing to do is to actually set the mirror. So I'm going to bring up my model toolbox with hotkey S, and I'm going to say mirror, M-I-R, mirror. There it is. So I'll hit enter. Now the pattern type is already set to faces, which is what I want, and then objects is what's selected, which is the faces. So I'm going to select these faces, this triangle, this one, and then this other triangle. So now I got those set up. What is it for? And now it says mirror plane. What is the plane on which you would like to mirror? So I'm going to select this golden guy here, the little orange one. And right now, it kind of gives you a little ghosted preview of what it's going to look like. And that's basically what we want. So I'm going to hit OK. And that applies it. And if you look down in the timeline, you can see that those two things that we did are now in the timeline. So now we have two of these features. And when we update some of our user parameters, like the length, you'll see that now both of these things updated, which is awesome. And even if we create the width, it still is adaptive. So this is awesome. Nothing broke here. The mid plane will always update because it's looking for those two surfaces. So when they get updated, not only do the features get updated, but our plane gets updated. And that's really powerful. That is awesome. So now we got these two features that are dynamic. They are driven with our user parameters, so we can make some really quick adjustments and really drastically change the kind of overall dimension of the design without having to do too much work, which is awesome. That really helped out with this project, the Featherbox project, because I needed a way to make it so that these features just kind of adapt with these user parameters. So I think this is a really cool and powerful way for your projects to kind of make these things adaptive. So again, it really depends on your project and what your goal is to it, but I think you can apply this to lots of different other things. So if you look at some of my other tutorials, we take a look at making really different shapes. So this can be applied to a lot of different shapes. It's not just has to be a box, but this really showcases, I think, in its simplest form of how you can use these set of steps to kind of make these features be driven and adaptive. So that's really cool. So I hope this helps you guys out. If you guys have any questions or any better ideas on how to kind of achieve this similar thing, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. And if you did like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And if you want to support content like this, you can always check out Adafruit. Last week's project was, of course, the 3D printed box for the Adafruit Feather. So if you're looking for a nice portable Arduino-based platform, check out the Adafruit Feather if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, happy CADing.